Welcome into Priced Out the Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Morgan, and here with your other host, Cornelius. Swart, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you?
Doing really, really good. We got a special show for him today. This one's one of the shows that I like because we got a chance to record on site, and it was a really, really interesting group you got a chance to speak to. Give us a little bit of a background.
Yeah, this podcast is just a live recording of a presentation I gave at an event called Turn On, and it was, and the event is hosted by a local company called 1000 Watt, and they are a branding and marketing firm that works for some of the biggest real estate brands in the world, including Berkshire Hathaway, which is Warren Buffett's, the real estate wing of Warren Buffett's mega corporation, Berkshire Hathaway. So these are realtors, people in the audience. It's almost like a TED Talk series, where people talk about the magic of the didgeridoo or managing your rock star personality. Those things, and I mean some fascinating people talking. And realtors come from around the country to do this 2-day kind of conference / it's just like a good time. And Marc Davidson, the guy who runs 1000 Watt, invited me to speak to these folks, and at first I didn't even believe it. At second, I was like angry. I was just like, I don't have nothing to say to Berkshire Hathaway. But he's a very smart guy from Brooklyn, grew up in Brooklyn, working class guy, and he's just concerned about gentrification, and so convinced me to go, and I gave this 20-minute speech, this 20-minute presentation, and we're just going to listen to the raw recording, the raw presentation.
All right, here it goes.
So our next guest is a journalist, documentary filmmaker, and private investigator here in Portland. He recently directed the film Priced Out, 15 Years of Gentrification in Portland, and he's currently producing the Priced Out podcast, which tells stories of gentrification in cities across the country. Please welcome Cornelius Swart.
Thank you very much. I think we'll just start out with a clip from the latest film on gentrification, Priced Out.
Michelle Lewis, take one.
What does the word gentrification mean to you?
Pain, loss, grief.
The people that are coming here now are completely oblivious to what was. They don't care to know about what was.
I've not yet found any indication that there's something positive associated for black people with gentrification.
And they're just tearing apart like stuff that represented our childhood, stuff that represented home for us.
I think when we look at the black community in relationship to gentrification, it's one of those things where there's that saying, if they come for me at night, they'll be coming for you in the morning.
Urban growth. Growth in inner cities has the potential to be one of the greatest vehicles for individual wealth creation and racial and class integration this country has ever seen. It also has the potential to be the stuff of riots and political backlash that could stifle the housing market for a generation. And folks in this room, more than most Americans, will have a say in what direction we choose to go as a society. And while I'll be talking about gentrification mostly in Portland and in the African American community, we all know that it's happening all around the country. East Liberty in Pittsburgh, Third Ward in Houston, Hilltop in Tacoma. Housing prices, rents are going up, business is good, but traditional residents are often finding themselves priced out of their own communities. And it's not just poor or working class people, increasingly it's middle class people as well. And just so you know about me, I'm Cornelius, and I'm a reporter, but I'm also a gentrifier. And I own commercial property, so I'm technically a landlord as well. I grew up in Hackensack, New Jersey, a working class suburb of New York, and my dad ran a property management company. And I spent my summers refurbishing apartments, collecting rents, working as a laborer for his developer buddies. So real estate has always been a part of my life. I moved to Portland in '95, and I almost became a city planner. But I started work on the first of my 2 documentaries on gentrification in the African-American communities of Portland's Albina neighborhood. And in 1998, I bought a house in the neighborhood with down payment help from my parents. And here's another clip that tells you a little bit what the neighborhood was like.
We start our story just before I arrived in the late 1990s, in a cluster of northeast Portland neighborhoods often called the Albina community. To many outsiders, Albina may have looked depressed, abandoned, even dangerous. But to many living there, it was a community unlike any other in Oregon.
Everybody in my neighborhood was black. The neighbor on this side, the neighbor on that side, across the streets, like everybody looked like me.
You just didn't see white people. In Northeast Portland.
People would turn their music up and everyone would come out on their porches and almost like have a party. And we knew each other. When you walk outside your front door, you speak. This whole thing of people not knowing their neighbors and not speaking, I'm just like, what is this?
It was a thriving black community, as former residents would describe it. 90%, unbelievable, 90% of the African-American population lived in this neighborhood when I got there in the mid-90s. And it was a place, the way Pastor Donald Frazier, local pastor, described it, that valued relationships more than the things that could be weighed and measured. It was a place where people, even if they felt, black people, even if they tell me, even if they felt hostility or isolation when they went out to the rest of Portland, which even then was the whitest city in America, there was always a sense of belonging when they came back to the neighborhood. That said, the neighborhood had problems, many problems. Like most inner cities, years of disinvestment had caused abandonment of properties, and that had aggravated crime. In 1990, there were 60 violent crimes per 1,000 residents in Albina. Now, to give you a sense of perspective, in 2016 in Chicago, there were 9 violent crimes per 1,000. The sale price for a home at that time in Albina was $30,000. So, when new white residents started coming in, businesses, investors started coming in, a lot of the residents that I spoke with welcomed their arrival. And the subject of our film, our first film, Northeast Passage, Nikki Williams, was a woman you'd see in the film, spent her time fighting drug dealers and closing down drug houses on her block. And so when she saw new white residents coming in, fixing up homes, putting in new businesses, she was like, bring it on. It's terrific. And in 2002, when the film was released, this first one, the average sale price of a home was $113,000. In 2016, it was $560,000. Commercial property, this is a corner of Alberta Street and 18th in 1994. Saw significant gains as well. Here it is in 2015. Between those 2 years, commercial property on the street went up 1,000%. And of course, this is happening all over the country. We're living through an unprecedented urban renaissance right now. And we all know it. Cities are being reborn with investment. Walkable neighborhoods are being recreated or created from scratch. This is West Philadelphia, around 30th Street Station. Historic properties are being brought back to life. This is over the Rhine in Cincinnati, the largest, somebody from Cincinnati? All right. It's the largest contiguous historic district in the country, or at least that's the claim. Savannah, one of the first fully restored historic cities in the country. And some of the more recent historic restorations, the epic movie palaces that have been recovered from abandonment in downtown Los Angeles. These are all different theaters. But over that period in Albina, during all this investment, home ownership actually declined. A neighborhood that was overwhelmingly renters could not compete in the marketplace that became dominated by home buyers from the suburbs. And as a result, the African American population, it's the map of Albina, African American community is represented in the dark rectangles. Over the decades, the community was literally wiped off the map, declining as much as 90% in some areas. It's classic gentrification. And we know how it happened. The system was rigged. We're not going to be over-validating in this speech. Most of us know the history. A lot of people outside the neighborhood don't know the history. But suburbs, over the last half century, were largely subsidized. For most of that history, they were segregated through zoning, through FHA programs that did not lend to African Americans and minorities. So the wealth in suburbia, the people who moved from suburbia into the inner city inherited that wealth that was generated through those subsidies. My inherited wealth came through home ownership in the suburbs. Conversely, people in the inner cities were regulated out of the marketplace. They could not participate in the marketplace, and they inherited poverty and all its social ills that go along with it. And it's an ugly history. Most people don't know it who are outside of the community. People in the community obviously know it. People outside the community just know, oh, that used to be a bad neighborhood, and now it's a good neighborhood, I want to live there. Which is why when a neighborhood starts to gentrify, the first thing that happens is you rebrand the neighborhood, change the name, distance the history, cover it up. And it, it may not be consciously done, but what it does is it reinforces that feeling of cultural, ethnic, and historical cleansing and erasure that, and this isn't me preaching, this is me reporting. This is me just relaying to you what hundreds of people have told me around the country over the course of 20 years. Right? Again, I'm not really opining, I'm really just reporting on this stuff. And so this is particularly galling. Here's a clip from our latest film, Priced Out, in which I go back to Nikki Williams 13 years later and ask her, now how do you feel about the changes in your neighborhood?
I live in the historic, and I have to say it that way, the historic Mississippi Avenue area.
Same place.
Same place, but not the same place. I am a full-time plus student. When I first moved here, the only white folks on the block were the gay couple next door. It went from one white occupied household to all white except 3. Damn. I don't go down Mississippi Avenue just because it's so damn white. And it's not just that it's white, it's like this, I'm afraid to talk to you, look at you, speak at you kind of white. So when I do go down Mississippi Avenue, I've jokingly said I feel like Moses with a staff in front of me because, the waters seem to part. Oh yeah, my skin is my sin, as usual, as usual. Yeah, there's a lot of stores and boutiques and places to shop. You have lots of eateries up and down Mississippi Avenue. We even have an ice cream shop, but who the hell can afford $4 for an ice cream cone for their kid? Yeah, I said it. And it's interesting to me because it's like a lot of these folks wouldn't have stepped foot over here back in the day. Wouldn't have stepped foot over here. Like, where were all y'all when it was time to do the foot patrol? Where were all y'all when it was time to get out here and and, you know, go toe-to-toe and face-to-face with drug dealers and gangbangers and all of that. That's what's so weird. I live in this community, fought like hell to make it quote-unquote livable, whatever the hell that was redefined to me, and now I don't even deal with it. Are you serious? I am very grateful that they don't have on this sign a bunch of brown-skinned people smiling, looking like they're having the time of their life, because that's one thing at least they didn't pretend and do that bullshit. They don't even pretend to include people like me. I guess what I wanted to see happen is people give a damn about the community that was there, not push everybody the hell out, then come in, build it up, and say now they can't come back. I wanted people to give a fuck about those of us who were there already.
She says it better than I can. Of course, in Portland and many coastal cities, it's gotten much worse than this. It's gone way beyond rebranding a neighborhood or loss of community feeling or neighborliness. In the last 5 years, almost every city on the West Coast has declared itself under a housing state of emergency. It's from the Barry reports. We know what's going on. I mean, it's in baby boomers and millennials fighting over inner city properties, speculative investors, capital fleeing other commodity markets, wide-scale abuse of market freedoms, have put many cities in a housing bind. Millions of people, poor, working poor, middle class, are finding themselves or will soon find themselves in the same boat as the former residents of Albino. Now, the good news is that 2 years after that last scene was recorded, Nikki sold her house. She actually was given a house by Habitat for Humanity, and she sold it for $300,000 and chose to pick up and move to Dallas, Texas in search of a cohesive black community. And that, she had a choice. She had a choice. And economic opportunity gave her that choice. And this is me opining. I think that's the world we want to live in, is where we believe that people have a choice and that economic activity and the marketplace facilitates and amplifies our choices. And that's a great aspiration, and it does occur. And we should feel good about participating in that system. But it doesn't always occur. And in Portland, it's not universally occurring because there has been massive involuntary displacement of working and middle-class people throughout the city of all races. And that is causing a massive backlash here. And I don't know if everyone here is from Portland, but in Portland over the last 2 years, we've seen a massive wave of legislators getting thrown out of office, new regulations coming in. Landlords are now penalized if they raise the rents more than 10%. The state legislature is poised to repeal its ban on rent control. And it's not just happening here. It's happening across the country where rent strikes are on the rise. The city of DC is being sued in federal court for gentrifying. And we're also seeing some darker things, belligerent, sometimes violent protests here in Boyle Heights, which is a Latino neighborhood across the river from downtown Los Angeles where all those lovely theaters were. Art galleries moved in, protesters vandalized them, smashed windows, destroyed the artwork, and now the galleries are leaving, moving out. And I can tell you, protesters are watching these things very carefully. So this dark example is what it's like to kill the goose that laid the golden egg. This is what happens when you shoot the last buffalo. And while this is certainly not to be held up, the broader political backlash, it's hard to see that, again, this is my opinion, as anything more than a natural reaction, a human reaction to the social disruption and abuses that occur under gentrification. So my point here is that it's in the inherent long-term interest of the industry to see gentrification as something that destroys communities. And for the industry, its agents, its associations, and its lobbyists to work actively to preserve, sustain, and create mixed income communities. Now that would take some legislation. The free market did not create this situation, and the free market alone cannot solve the problem. These are just suggestions. I don't really know your own markets or your own industry. So, I'm just throwing stuff out there. What I'm really advocating for here is a change in attitude or a greater sense of mindfulness. I think a lot of the speakers here tonight, today, talked about mindful practices, talked about mindful living. I've spoken with a good number of you. I know that you're thoughtful people. Everyone I've talked to is a responsible person, thinks about what the impact of their decisions are. So I think that's the most important thing, is we continue to think that way when we do our daily business, but also when we advocate to our political agents in the system. Mark asked me to bring up Airbnb as an example. I'm working on a story here in Portland where, and this is not on the record yet, but it could be 40% of the Airbnbs in Portland are in violation of the laws at a time when we're having a housing crisis. They're obviously taking units off the market. So just thinking about the way we thread in with all of these aspects. The real estate industry for me is about selling the idea of a home as well as a home. It's about selling the idea of a community, and that makes you the perfect advocates for measures that protect communities against gentrification. It fits in with your brand. And I know that you're all under pressure, tremendous pressure to produce results. Again, I grew up in the industry. And I would say the good news is that everyone I've talked to over the years wants to own a home. Rich, poor, black, white, doesn't matter. It's the American dream. So you guys are a force for good. Neighbors I talk to they don't say, I don't want new neighbors. They just say, I don't want to be abused by them. They don't say, stop the investment. They just say, I want to see some benefit from the investment, or at least my community sees some benefit from the investment. And it can be done. This is the Pearl District in Portland here. And it's universally known as a high-end shopping district and residential district. Which most people don't know, though, is that it's the largest concentration of regulated affordable housing in the city. The two things can coexist if we want them to. It can happen. So I do think the future is bright. I'm just asking us to see gentrification as a kind of negative industrial byproduct that hurts the long-term health of your industry and creates a negative perception of the industry. So I ask you to cultivate community, to see housing advocates as allies, and in the future, please don't rename the neighborhood. Except that one, you can rename that one. That's fine. Thank you very much.
Cornelius was a little concerned about giving a talk like this to the real estate industry. I assured him that you would appreciate this. Have you? Like, you get what he's saying, right? That was a great talk. Anybody have any questions for Cornelius? If you're raising your hand, I can't see it, so just ask it out. Yeah.
So how does one get in, let's say, into, for whatever reason, into one of those places that are currently going through this process of just housing, inexpensive housing, whatever, and actually become a member of a long-standing community in a way that doesn't, not being an asshole.
Right, has a new...
How does one actually blend in to exist and mix and contribute and do all the right stuff? Like, what would you do? What have you done, frankly, because you've done this here?
Yeah, I think if you're like advising clients, I would really ask them to say, spend some time just observing the neighborhood, being deferential to your neighbors, and just knock on some doors and ask them about the history. I think the thing we hear most is like, yeah, people don't look me in the eye, people push past me. I go into a store and they're like, hey, when did you get in the neighborhood? I was like, but I've been here for 40 years. So learning about the history of the neighborhood is the first step. And then deferring, giving people the benefit of the doubt if they are louder than you, Maybe they have different tastes than you do. Not condemning people for maybe not fitting in with what you think the neighborhood should look like. And then, just talking to your neighbors. Just talk to them. The oldest ones are the best to start with. There's a expression in this neighborhood which is you got to respect the old people because fools don't make it that long.
Anyone else? All right, cool.
I give these talks all the time to realtors. Here in Oregon, you can get professional development credit towards your continuing education for your broker's license. So feel free to look me up. We love doing screenings.
Any local brokers? Sean, you guys?
Oh, right, pricedOutMovie.com. That'll tell everything. All right, thank you very much.
Awesome.
All right, and we're back. So how do you think you did?
I don't know. I have really no idea how I did. I think when the lights came up, it was like, deer in headlights, kind of jaws open, was what I saw. Afterwards, some people came up to me and said it was really good or they enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective back in the audio, they put me back there with the working class, and so everyone enjoyed it. I could tell that people were captivated because there were other speakers where people got up and walked about, during their time speaking, and everyone pretty much stayed still and locked in. And so outside of that, the audience was engaged, and it was no different than our usual Q&As where someone has to be first and then everyone else feels comfortable.
Right.
And so once someone asked a question, I saw other hands kind of, like that halfway dart up kind of thing where it's like, I want to ask, but, So I think you laid down a really great foundation. You planted a good seed, I should say, in a lot of individuals' mind.
It was interesting because I had a Q&A afterwards, and Mark actually ran up on stage in order to get a Q&A in there because most speakers don't have Q&As.
They heard that.
What's that?
I'm leaving that in.
What's that?
The Q&A.
Oh, good. Yeah, okay.
So,
but people should know that most of the other speakers didn't have Q&As.
No, they didn't. They got off stage and it was to not even applause. Because it was just like, all right, I got to hurry up and go. And so what I noticed was not only did they clap for you when you ended naturally, but then they clapped for you again after the Q&A. So I believe you did. So I believe you did well. I really honestly do. So, and I'm not just saying that because I'm here.
It would be uncomfortable if you didn't say something nice.
But yeah, it was pretty good. And the reason why I asked the question from the get-go is because of the audience. A lot of people take advantage of those opportunities and say, okay, it's soapbox time. I'm going to make you guys feel bad. And really, you just reported the truth and let the truth do, for lack of a better way of saying it, you let the truth do what it do. And so they kind of went with the flow there. So I think it was a pretty good overall. I liked it.
And yeah, I do think it went well, and I really want to thank again Marc Davidson for inviting me. The guy who was on before me, it was an interview with a realtor, a real estate investor who was incredibly successful. Was an older guy, near his retirement, running a giant company, and one of the things he said was even he was worried about the political climate. And he's not like, he didn't sound like he was like, a liberal guy or anything.
He did not sound liberal at all.
But he was like, we've gotten to the point where no matter how crazy your ideas might be, there's someone who's going to agree with them because you can get into a bubble and there's too much what they called over-validating going on. And I dropped a reference to over-validating in my own presentation. So I really applaud Marc Davidson's courage for bringing his customers in and then having someone completely validate them, tell them the opposite narrative of what they hear every day, perhaps.
My hope is that it'll be effective. that it really will cause at least a few of the decision makers in these big companies to say, okay, let's re-envision something. Let's do something different. So,
and I think it'll be okay for everyone as long as we're able to, have the courage to contradict people a little bit, to not get in those bubbles, and when we do have a contrary opinion, to really try to be respectful in a way that people will hear it, and not like be shrill. That's my little soapbox. I'm not reporting. That was my opinion.
Yeah. So what's new? What else we got?
So next week, next podcast, we will have Rasan Muhammad, who is a fascinating guy. He's going to talk about gentrification as seen from the point of view of the street dealer.
Yeah.
That is the next podcast. We're gonna be launching a new series of pods within this series called Cut Out, things that were left out, or point of views that were left out or cut out from our last two documentaries, things that we did not talk about in the film that we should talk about, but that we just didn't have time.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man. Speaking of good stuff, I always want to bring up something special, something near and dear to me, and that's comic books. And so Netflix now has Luke Cage, the second season, and I binged most of it. I am not proud of myself, but I watched 10 episodes straight. I neglected family and work and everything.
Children were starving.
Yeah, it took some damage, but hey, I can repair that. So I've got 2 more episodes left, but it's great. It's a really, 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 really great season. Started off kind of slow, but I recommend anyone binge it and sit down and watch it. I think the respectful thing to do is to binge it. At least
to be respectful.
Yeah, at least go 6 episodes in.
You can do it for Game of Thrones.
Yeah, you can. You can do this. Just 6 episodes in, then you can have a restroom break. That type of thing.
Now, can you tell us a little bit? I mean, you're wearing a Black Panther shirt at this moment.
Yeah.
When we talked about when Black Panther came out that you were actually a Luke Cage fan. You had a Luke Cage shirt when we were talking about Black. So now, to me, is there a distinction there when you're watching or reading those two different storylines, because they're both Black heroes,
right?
But one is African and one is African American.
Yeah,
and that's a big distinction in my mind.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, and there were 2 different writers, because the initial writer of Black Panther was a white man, and as it's passed down, like Coates writes Black Panther now, and he's one of the greatest writers of our time. What was it, the 8 Years of Power book that he has out? I can't think of it, but he's a really brilliant writer who writes for the New York Times and everything. Where when they tried to relaunch Luke Cage, it was just written by a staff writer, no one special,
no celebrity
and
writer.
The storylines were kind of weak, and the difference between Luke Cage is that he's hero for hire. Like, he is meant and designed to just be Harlem's hero, or be a localized hero that can team up with other people. And so he's not. It's not a spiritual thing. It's like it was a science experiment. And now he's protecting this community, that he landed in. Where with Black Panther, this spiritual thing overtakes him that gives him his special abilities. He's an Avenger, where eventually Luke Cage becomes an Avenger, but that's after Avengers die off and all these other things happen. And, the storylines always intermingle. But
is there a different? Do you get a different cultural experience there, or is that just? I mean, it's just fun,
That's all it is. 100%. It's just 100% like, hey, here's the American Black hero. Here's the hero that is world, and and they do not do well with, in my opinion, just my opinion, they do a beautiful job of showing Africa as this land that if you don't see it, you don't know what it is. They paint a beautiful picture. You know what Harlem looks like. and they still...
It's a beautiful place.
Yeah, even with the new Harlem, they still paint gentrified Harlem and Brooklyn and all these other things, because the Falcon is in Harlem as well. And so they paint Harlem in these newer comics as still having these underlying issues, but with a prettier background. So it's like it's still kind of an odd thing. But yeah, they are two totally separate fields. You get two totally different fields. Yeah. So
what should we watch for with this new season?
I think the key thing to watch for is looking at the jokes, the subtle jokes, like even the market. Like you could see where they make a few marketing jokes, like as far as they just show Luke Cage now being this big brandable thing. So they have like sports references in there where all of a sudden he's trying out for the Jets. And you know, like all these different things, which is what would happen in real life. If a hero popped up, they would find a way to try to market him.
That's true.
Nike was in negotiation with him. And, you know, like all these different things pop up. T-shirts, people are selling bootlegs of his fights, you know, on the streets. And so I think that was the part that was enjoyable to me, was the attention to those little details. And then if you know the comics, there's a lot of small underlying jokes that are in there, you know, in between where you'll get the references every now and then. So yeah.
And just last but not least, in terms of your attire, you're also wearing some classic Marvel Comics
Vans.
Those are Vans.
Vans just released a whole line of Marvel apparel. So it's like they've got Black Panther shoes, Thor shoes, all of them. My daughter brought me the one with all the mini faces on it.
Yeah, the faces of the Avengers, right?
Yeah,
and Spider-Man is on there.
Yeah, and so
and they're the old school drawings. These are like from the '60s drawings.
Yeah, and I don't want to get them dirty, but it's like, but I also, like a little kid, want to wear them every day. So like I'm finding reasons to put these on. Like I'm wearing a suit and like, hey, does this match my wife's? Like, no. You know, so like, you know, it is what it is. But I will be wearing these until I can't wear them anymore until it looks bad. Like my favorite thing is the anklet says Marvel on it.
Oh yeah,
like
nice.
that is
sweet.
You know, that's the first thing that goes bad in a pair of shoes.
I would have loved to have worn those when I was 12. If they were, I mean, not that I wouldn't wear them now, but I'm saying when I was 12, I would have I would have shot somebody for those.
Yeah, like and my child, like my 10-year-old, he's like, no, it's no way in the world I would be caught dead in like superhero shoes. And it's like, yeah.
So, but when you're an adult, you're like you're above it all. You know, it's like you can go back to your childhood and wear stuff that just you don't care anymore.
It's a conversation starter, if nothing else. It gets conversation started. They see it and they feel comfortable, and it gets me beyond the I don't know if he's a scary black guy thing. And like, so we get into good conversation. So I use it as a tool. I'm using them as a tool. That's why I'm going to wear them until they're filthy.
Right on. So. All right. That's our show. And we will see you you will hear from us again.
Yes, you will.
Maybe that should be our exit line.
Yeah.
You will hear from us again.
Yeah. Does that
He's giving me a face like, nah.
It might. Yeah. We're trying out different things. We'll see. That's it. That's what it is. We'll see.
We'll see.
All right.